Good morning, everyone. Why ECLAT? Why there was a need for this study? I think it's more than obvious that there are so many users out there, and electronic cigarettes are becoming more and more popular and widely available. This has generated, for some unknown reason, concern in the public eye, and particularly at the regulatory level. And the bottom line of all this concerning attitude is that we need more research. So here we are, presenting good quality research that we hope is going to stand as a milestone for the future research on electronic cigarettes to come. The title, the acronym ECLAT, signifies efficiency and safety of an electronic cigarette as tobacco cigarette substitute. To me, electronic cigarette is not a smoking cessation aid, but a smoking cessation aid. In brief, these are the details of the study participants. I just want to highlight and underscore that the participants entered voluntarily in the study by responding to a media advert, and they were not wishing to quit smoking. Okay, so this is an unusual population from a smoking cessation study point of view. Overview of the study design, it's a classic parallel arm randomized control study where we control for the nicotine contents. These are changes in the use of cigarette per day from baseline among each study groups. The light gray area represent the first 6 weeks, and the dark gray area represent the following interventional 6 weeks. So the intervention was limited in the first 3 months of the study. Thereafter was simply an extension phase, an observational phase of the study. And as you can see here, whatever you use, whether it's high dose nicotine, medium dose nicotine, or non-nicotine, they're all significantly different from baseline. This is another interesting diagram showing the usage of cartridges throughout the study. Don't forget, the cartridges were provided for free by the company up to week 12. So this is ad libitum use of cartridges. This is an innovation in a study of this type. So we allowed them to use as much as they wished, with a simple limitation, which was no more than 4 cartridges per day, because there was the limit stated by the manufacturer. So you say more or less they used 2 or 2.5 cartridges per day of this product. And when the product was no longer available during the observation phase, there was a fall. Let's have a look at the main outcome measure. Let's start with the reducers. Smoking reduction was one of the main important outcome measures, and as you can see here, people starting regardless what they're having, they start at about 20% success rate, and then they progress to a certain point, and then of course after the unavailability of the cartridges, the success rate will decline progressively. And this is for the quitters, and quitters' situation is slightly different. Despite being unavailable here, quit rates stay stable, regardless the content of nicotine. Actually, this is, I think, a common theme in the studies when they use people not willing to quit. People not willing to quit, if they're happy and they quit immediately. So you don't have to do long follow-up. Important factors when interpreting the data. First of all, keep in mind this is not an ordinary smoking cessation study. Second, keep in mind that the product tested and which are presenting now, that is June 2003, was actually in production in 2009. And this is a model that at that time was probably top of one of the top of the gamma, but now by current standards, we consider them entry product with limited performance as actually very difficult to use. Another very important thing then that derives from the previous slides is that, you know, these two guys may look very similar, but in fact they're very different. This is a feline, this is a rabbit, this is a cat. So never interpret electronic cigarette as generalistic information. It needs to be referred to the product that is being tested. Okay, of course, smoking is addictive. In the US, the annualized cessation rate is at about 3%. Why am I showing this? Because the interpretation of the data needs to be contrasted with what happens in the general population, because a smoker not willing to quit is the smoker in the general population. So that's to give you an idea of how good could be this data. Actually, it's even better, because this is the statistic from the Italian National Statistics showing that the annualized rate is 0.02%. But we also incorporated in ECLAT important measures of the participant perception and level of satisfaction with the product. And to cut a long story short, in terms of how much did you rate this product compared to your own brand, you know, if we take the 5 line, well, it was just adequate, but was not really perfect. Changes to this question, how much did you miss your own brand, your own tobacco cigarette? And, you know, we are in the range of 6. There's no difference, again, in between groups. And finally, these guys, despite all of this, they would recommend the product to friends and relatives. We are in the range of 7 and 8. No difference in between the 3 groups. And again, there were a number of questions about the pros and cons of the product. But again, to cut a long story short, the product was not really easy to use. It was remember, it was a 3-piece. So 3-piece entails taking the cartridge, fiddling with the atomizer, trying to make a hole in the aluminum foil, and so forth. Technical defects and poor availability of the product could have were perceived by the users as a big problem with this product. This product, however, can be improved, and we see now, 2013, Categoria is having new products that are completely different, and they're big advancement compared to those of the past. So if we can have, we also need to consider that the fact that we're not easy to use, inferior technical performance, and poor availability, we're playing against these success rates. So because we believe that this is a product in fast evolution, it is very likely that if we evolve the product in the right direction, we will push the success rates upwards. Key learnings. So electronic cigarettes can help smokers reducing tobacco consumption, can reduce tobacco-related symptoms. I haven't shown symptoms here, but trust me. Electronic cigarettes can relieve smokers' craving and withdrawal symptoms from tobacco. Electronic cigarettes are essentially safe. Of course, more work will be required in the long term. Enhancing design, technology, and taste of these products will surely lead to improvement outcomes, and we know this from the survey, today's surveys. However, it makes me smile to say that we have demonstrated something that we already knew. We already knew that electronic cigarettes are efficacious. They can decrease tobacco smoking. You know, here Mike has already shown in a series of surveys that they are very effective at having smokers steering away from tobacco. And even Elaine here knows from his own experience and from the experience of the other CASA member how effective is this product. So basically, we are forced to prove that the water is warm because the regulatory bodies requires us to do that. I just wish to say a big, big thank you to all my collaborators that are sustaining this research unrelentlessly. Thank you. Having the now pleasure to introduce Mike Siegel. Mike Siegel is professor in the Department of Community Health Sciences in the Boston University School of Public Health.
Thank you, Ricardo. So what I want to do is just highlight some of the major points of the study and focus on what is the policy significance, what is the public health significance of this, and how does this study fit in light of what we already know about electronic cigarettes. So the first thing I want to emphasize is that this is really the first long-term clinical trial of electronic cigarettes. So this study is very significant. Previous information that we've had to judge the effectiveness of these products has largely been based on anecdotal evidence of the experience of people who've tried the product, as well as survey evidence. And this is the first really rigorous scientific long-term clinical study of this product. And so it's very important because it really sets the bar high for future research. Another point that I want to highlight, which I think was perhaps surprising, is that of those who quit smoking, more than 70% of them actually quit using electronic cigarettes as well. So they not only quit smoking, but they quit using nicotine entirely. That wasn't necessarily the intention of the study, but for whatever reason, these smokers were able to either wean themselves off or just discontinue using the electronic cigarette. And so after a year, they were completely nicotine-free. So what this study really shows is that not only are electronic cigarettes comparable to traditional approved nicotine replacement therapy, but based on this study, they're actually better. They're actually more effective in being able to provide an alternative for people who are very resistant to quitting. I think there are two very broad and important implications of this research. The first is that opponents of electronic cigarettes have been arguing that we only have anecdotal evidence that electronic cigarettes work, that the only evidence that we have that these products may be effective is the testimony of individual users. That is no longer the case. Opponents can no longer state that the only evidence we have for the effectiveness of these products is the use of the product and the individual testimonies. We now have the kind of rigorous scientific evidence that these opponents have been asking for. And second, opponents of electronic cigarettes can no longer argue that people who are using this product are merely substituting one addiction for another, because we have pretty strong evidence that a large number of people who quit smoking using these products were actually able to get off electronic cigarettes as well. But I do want to emphasize 2 points. One is that the testimony of electronic cigarette users is valuable, and the absence of that evidence, although it's important that we added this rigorous scientific evidence, the absence of having it did not mean that there was not solid scientific evidence. The fact that there are literally thousands and thousands and thousands of users who testified to the success of the product, and the fact that the sales of these products are skyrocketing, the fact that 3 different tobacco companies have now gotten into the business, in and of itself is really all that you need to know that these products are effective. And second, I want to emphasize that even if smokers were to simply switch to electronic cigarettes but not quit using the electronic cigarettes, to not quit using nicotine, their health would be immensely improved. We now know that the levels of carcinogens are in electronic cigarettes compared to tobacco cigarettes are reduced by 3 orders of magnitude, meaning that they're more than 1,000 times lower. We know that there are very few chemicals in the electronic cigarettes, so you're reducing or eliminating your exposure to literally tens of thousands of chemicals, including 60 known carcinogens. There's no question that using an electronic cigarette greatly reduces one's risk of cancer and also of obstructive lung disease and respiratory symptoms. And finally, I just want to mention a few possible reasons for the observed effectiveness of these products. Why is it that we're seeing such success, and why is it that they appear to be more effective than nicotine replacement therapy? And I think the answer lies in what happened with that 0 milligram nicotine group. In the ECLAT study, 4% of that group were able to quit smoking after a year, and an additional 12% reduced the amount they smoked by greater than 50%. That means that 16% of people who received no nicotine, essentially no nicotine, were still able to substantially reduce the amount they smoke. How can that be explained? And I think what this sheds light on is a misconception that we've previously had, and that is the idea that nicotine is what makes smoking addictive. There's no question that nicotine plays a major role, a central role in the addictiveness of smoking. But there are many other aspects of the addiction that I think are important that have been neglected. All of the behavioral aspects, the physical aspects, the psychological aspects, the association of the behavior with eating, with drinking, with waking up, with going to sleep, with various things that happen during the day. Smoking is not just a pharmacologic addiction, it's also a psychological addiction, a physical addiction, a behavioral addiction, and even a social addiction. There are social aspects to the behavior. And a nicotine patch or nicotine gum simply cannot replace those things. But an electronic cigarette, as we've found, can do that. It produces the same physical sensations, the same psychological associations. You can use the electronic cigarette in the same situations in which you would use a tobacco cigarette. And I think that's the reason why even the sample that received no nicotine was able to find some relief from their symptoms and found the product to be acceptable and recommended it uniformly, very highly. And that is because the act of holding the electronic cigarette, all of the social aspects, the psychological aspects are a sufficient replacement for the act of smoking. And that's why this product is so effective. And so I think that in closing, what this research really leads us to is a changing paradigm in public health, and particularly in smoking cessation. Dr. Pelosa's work really changes our entire paradigm, because prior to this, the paradigm was that smoking is a disease of addiction to nicotine. And all of our smoking strategies were based on just focusing on the nicotine receptor, whether it's nicotine replacement therapy or even a drug like Chantix. The purpose of Chantix is to work at the level of the nicotine receptor. It's a partial nicotine agonist. The nicotine vaccine, you may have heard about, is something that's being researched. So all of our efforts in smoking cessation have been focused at that little nicotine receptor. And I think what Dr. Pelosa has showed us is that people are a lot more than just a collection of nicotine receptors. And if you look at the entire person as a human being who has psychological needs, social needs, that the electronic cigarette is a product which really is a holistic approach to treating smoking cessation. It goes beyond this very narrow view of people as simply being little rats that are pressing a lever to get nicotine, and looks at the complexities of human behavior. And this is why electronic cigarettes truly offer us an alternative approach that we've never had before. And this is why I believe that these products have the potential to truly save lives and make a huge difference and really be a game changer in public health.